Hey guys, Shalana here. Welcome to the Binge Zone. On today's video, we're going to be talking about the Netflix original movie, Raising Dion. So if you guys have not seen it, stop this video now, go watch it, because from this moment forward, nothing but spoilers, because we're talking about the ending, Dion's powers, how they manifested, as well as the potential villain for season 2. So again, if you have not seen it, go watch it now, because spoilers here on out. So let's dive into Raising Dion, and more specifically, before we get into the ending of the smoke monster, Crooked Man, let's talk about Dion's abilities, how they got their abilities, as well as how the Crooked Man also got his abilities. So we know that in 2010, Dion's father and his best friend Pat went on this excursion in Iceland, and it was then that all these individuals who were exposed to this meteor shower, they got abilities, they went about their way, their iodine levels, their DNA, and their genetic makeup all got altered to give them some sort of abilities that revolve around the manipulation of ions in the real world, as well as Pat, who got the short end of the stick and ends up being the Crooked Man. And we're gonna get into why he's the Crooked Man and why everybody else got more beneficial powers. But from that moment on, Dion's father began to experience these abilities, and then when he had Dion, they were passed down genetically. That's because his DNA, his genetic makeup, his physiology changed, and thus through reproduction it also passed on to his son Dion, making Dion an alternate human as well, because these guys are not regular humans. Their DNA are different, the levels that they operate on are different, and we see this when Dion goes to the hospital and his iodine levels are way through the roof, and they were going to try to bring it down. However, if they brought that down, it would have killed Dion. They had to give him more. And iodine in the body, everyone has it, but we have a small amount of it, and that's because we just need a smaller amount to function. However, in their case, they need an absorbent amount of it, and that's because their abilities revolve around manipulating ions. We see Pat explain this to Dion. It's not that Dion is levitating whatever object he has in front of him. It's the fact that he's moving the ions around the object, thus carrying said object, as opposed to telekinetically moving the object itself. It's the manipulation of the ions around the object that causes them to move, and that's also the basis of all their powers. So let's break down some of his abilities. The first ability we talked about was the ability of Dion moving ions around objects to make it look like he's telekinetically moving said object. The second ability that Dion displays is teleportation. Now this one's tricky to understand because the concept of teleportation itself is a very tricky concept. So I don't want to get too deep into it because I'm not sure how that works. I'm not sure if Dion rides the ions to his destination, therefore making it look like he's teleporting. And I just don't know how that works, because he would have to deconstruct his body ionically and reconstruct it somewhere else, therefore achieving teleportation, or he just rides the ion waves to his destination, which would make sense, but then it goes on to the speed of which the ions travel, and then you have his other ability to use electricity, which is supercharging the ions and zapping people. Those are Dion's primary abilities, and the abilities that his father and other people like him displayed. But now let's talk about Pat and his abilities. Pat is the Crooked Man. He is the storm monster. And why is he the storm monster? Well, we see he was physically touched by the meteor shower, while everyone else got to watch the lights, and the lights, just the radiation from that came onto them. They weren't physically touched. We see Pat go outside and the meteors are falling on him. Thus, his transformation is more drastic than theirs. His ions are supercharged. And if you know anything about storms, and I'm not going to pretend I do, I just took an intro to meteorology one time in college, but they're supercharged ions, thus creating the storms. It's the positive ions, negative ions clashing, and it's mostly negative ions that cause a storm. And because of the way Pat's genetic makeup was changed, he's unstable, just like a storm cloud is unstable, and he needs to keep his stability. And that's why he goes around absorbing and killing other people's powers, because they have raised levels of ion and iodine within them to actually sustain his body and sustain his health before he dies. And because of that, he goes and he tracks down everyone from Iceland. He tries to absorb them. And when he's in his storm Crooked Man form, he can't see individuals as they are. He just sees the energy that radiates from them, their iodine levels, the ions around them, all of that. He can see that as a glowing form of energy. And that's why he killed Dion's father. Not because he had any vendetta or he hated Mark. That was his best friend. But when he's in this form, he can't tell the difference between human faces. He just sees energy, and he attacked the nearest one, and he only needs one to sustain him for every once in a while, which is very interesting and brings up the fact that, is he truly a villain, or is he just a force of nature trying to sustain himself? But that's a video and topic unto itself. The instability of his powers needs him to find a large energy source, and that's how that works. So that's Dion and Pat's powers. And then we have Brayden's powers, who Brayden is going to be the central bad guy of the second season. And they've been laying the groundworks for that since we're introduced to him. When his father goes out and sees those kids hotboxing, Brayden's initial reaction is, we should have killed those guys as opposed to letting them go. And then after his father passes, he grows a hatred for Dion, only because Dion is the focal point of the story and no one cares about him per se, and they're trying to save and find Dion, which makes him seem like, what about me? I'm a kid too, I need help. But they left him behind with his crazy evangelical aunt, and that snaps the kid, and that's why he's the main bad guy. And at the end of the series, we see that Dion's father tells Dion and his wife that energy is never destroyed, just transferred from one form into another, therefore giving us hope that the father can come back, Michael B. Jordan's character Mark can come back, but also seeing that Pat wasn't destroyed. Pat is energy, and he just looks for another host, looks for another way to re-energize himself and get energy. So that's why he goes to Brayden to fill his mind up with all these things, because he needs that kid to track down these other supers to get his body back. So they can never truly defeat him because he will not die, because energy cannot be killed. However, while that does come off a bit gloomy, we also know that when it comes to the good guys, all these guys who are absorbed by Pat throughout the show and before the show, they can also come back. They just have to find a way to transfer their energy back into human body. We see that Mark was able to come back for a brief moment. However, he wasn't able to stay because his energy had already been absorbed. So they have to find a way to take his energy and retool it, repurpose it, and bring it back. But overall, Raising Dion is a fresh take of the superhero genre, and we have these various forms of pseudoscience that goes into it, but it's also a story about loss, raising families, and recovering from the loss of a parent, as well as raising a child as a single mother, which is the focal point of the plot of Raising Dion, and all the things that you have to be able to do and go above and beyond, especially if your child is a special needs child. Not saying Dion himself is special needs, but he kind of is because of his abilities and just the hardship of it all. Even his best friend is a special needs person, and that is very taxing and tough on the family. So we got to see that, but not in the typical, he's a special needs kid, we need to take extra precautions with him kind of way. We got to see that as him being a superhero, and it's just a more whimsical way of showing the dynamics of that type of relationship, which I found refreshing in the superhero genre. So far this year, we've been getting a lot of good shit, so such as The Boys, now Raising Dion. Granted, the quality of the shows may not be the same. Like The Boys is like here, and Raising Dion is like right here, right? But the fact that it's different venturing in the Joker, we have the superhero genre going in a positive direction, adapting and taking things from that genre and turning and making new stories with those. So I thoroughly enjoyed Raising Dion. That was my explanation for the season 1. If you guys like this video, definitely give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button if you guys have not already, and until next time, binge on.